Hey everyone, this is Cal from Plant-Based News. A couple of weeks ago, the popular YouTube channel called What I've Learned put out a video called Vegan Diets Don't Work. This is not a surprise given the channel has put out a number of videos recently that are anti-vegan. But what was interesting about this video was that it featured many ex-vegans that I've personally known. In this video, I'm going to tell you the truth about these influencers, how they came out as ex-vegan and why the plant-based diets weren't sustainable.
Me and my family have struggled with health on a vegan diet.
I am no longer following a vegan diet.
I found it very difficult to maintain a healthy plant-based diet.
I'm not vegan anymore.
For full transparency, I've been vegan for over 10 years. I first became interested in the plant-based lifestyle after reading a book called The China Study, which showcased how the longest-lived cultures historically consumed a predominantly plant-based diet. I then started to look into the ethical and environmental reasons for not eating animals and then became a vegan. Through this journey, I've had the opportunity to meet many of the content creators that ditched their vegan diets. I've met people like Mikado Avocado, for instance, before he started his fame-hungry ex-vegan downward health spiral, as well as people like Tim Sheaf and Brianna Jackson. But I want to start with Alex from Cosmic Skeptic. He quit his vegan diet a couple of months ago. He told his over 500,000 subscribers via a YouTube community post that he was reevaluating his ethical position on eating animals and have been consuming animal products again, primarily but not exclusively sea animals. More recently, he shared a video elaborating on this decision, and thankfully, we don't need to explain how you can get all the nutrients you need in a plant-based diet because he says it himself.
So people have been asking, well, what's this magical nutrient that you can only get from an animal product that you can't get from plants? I want to clarify from the start, there isn't one. Every nutrient that you need to be healthy can be found in an adequately planned plant-based diet.
Now, before we get into this properly, check out this short clip from an interview I did with Cosmic Skeptic a couple of years ago when he was a vegan.
If human beings anatomically, physiologically required animal protein or animal products for their health, for survival, would that make any of your moral arguments less watertight?
No, I don't think so. Because my argument is essentially a conditional one. If we can avoid inflicting torturous suffering upon an animal, then we should do so.
What's really interesting is that since that interview, we see his language change. In his message where he revealed he was quitting the vegan lifestyle, for example, he refers to sea animals as seafood, which is a simple and perhaps subconscious attempt at distancing himself from the fact that these animals are sentient beings. We see the same thing of Elise, another ex-vegan YouTuber previously known as Raw Alignment, where all of a sudden sentient cows become beef.
It's definitely in your best interest to source 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef.
And then all too often, fish and eggs are used as the gateway back into non-vegan lifestyle.
They tried animal products, some salmon and eggs.
Adding in fish and eggs.
Some eggs, and then that evolved into wild-caught fish.
I'm eating my first egg today.
And it's not just online influencers. Around the time Miley Cyrus unfollowed us, she also came out with this.
Was vegan for a very long time, and I've had to introduce fish and omegas into my life because my brain wasn't functioning properly. I feel that I'm
slowed you down.
Now I'm so much sharper than I was, and I think that I was at one point pretty malnutrition.
The first night after I had that salmon, I had a wet dream. I hadn't ejaculated in months.
Well, when I hear about these cases where someone has like a single serving of fish, you know, their life just changes overnight. It's just physiologically not really possible. That screams to me placebo effect. Even if there was something they were missing in that food, you're just not going to fix it that quickly.
Putting aside the stories of orgasms and other stories we hear, which, by the way, I'm not actually dismissing, but what I actually want to know is, why do we always hear about the fish and eggs first? Well, fish are essentially the polar opposite of us, and it can be hard for people to empathize with our scaly friends. Similarly, eggs seem to be easily distanced from exploitation, as we see Bonnie Rebecca emphasizing how important humane eggs are.
Here are the eggs that I have at the moment. Usually I get them from the farmers markets, but if not, I get them from my local health food shop. And some things that I obviously look out for is organic, free range, but also over here, they will always tell you maximum amount of hens per hectare. So 600 hens per hectare is really good, and that's just something that I like to look out for. Means that they have a lot of room and it's really ethical, humane conditions. So
now, being completely honest, many of us, or at least the majority of us, have probably had this romantic feeling that eggs can be ethical, whether it's when we go to a friend's house and they've got backyard eggs, or whether we buy into the humane egg marketing ploys. I just want to be super clear, eggs are always the product of exploitation. The majority of chicks sold to become backyard hens come from the same hatcheries that supply factory farms. This means the male counterpart of every female chick born is shredded alive on the first day of life, as they cannot be exploited for eggs. If the hatchery misidentifies the male chicks and they're sent out with the females, they'll likely be killed at just a few weeks old by the farm. And yes, this includes backyard farms and homesteaders. This is well demonstrated in this clip we found of a small backyard farmer who hatches her own eggs, and similar sentiment is shared by a community in the comments.
One of you two has been rejected. Who do you think it is? Wrong, it's you. You're staying, you're gone. Sorry. Wasn't sure about you, but I'm going to tip towards gone. So, gone. One of you two has been rejected. Who do you think it is? Wrong.
This is what it boils down to, right? In nature, the wild ancestor chickens lay 10 to 20 eggs per year, just enough to ensure the continuation of their species. But the chickens we farm now have been selectively bred and genetically manipulated to produce up to 300 eggs every year. This puts a massive burden on their bodies and causes a host of unavoidable health problems. Even if they are rescued, they'll often die prematurely because their bodies have been genetically brutalized. But it goes one step further because the ethical and moral inconsistencies among ex-vegans become apparent even before they go back to consuming animal products. Take Elise Parker, for instance, who bought a dog from a breeder while still claiming to be an ethical vegan. As we know, every purchase from a breeder condemns a shelter dog to death, which is definitively not in line with the principles of ethical veganism. We see a similar thing at Bonnie Rebecca when, almost immediately after going ex-vegan, she shows off an expensive new wool rug and a feather-filled couch. If you stop being vegan for your health, why wouldn't you continue to abstain from animal products in all other aspects of your life? Anyway, the next online figure I want to talk about is John Venus.
Been amazing. You know, this is what I'm about. You know, vegan fitness is what I do. So for me, it's like a mini dream come true for sure.
I always used to see him at events, and then a couple of years ago, he made some videos about how the vegan lifestyle is very dangerous. And then a year later said it wasn't and jumped back onto the plant-based lifestyle. So I'm not sure if he's vegan or not. But I remember seeing a post of him proudly shared on his Instagram about how he'd killed a reindeer. He described the process of cutting, ripping, and breaking the animal's body. He claimed the lifestyle shift was due to concerns around children consuming a plant-based diet. Is there any merit to that, though?
I mean, there are some legitimate concerns around providing enough calories to promote growth. When you look at sort of the whole foods plant-based diet approach, you know, no oil, no added sugars and whatnot, it can be challenging for a child with a pretty small stomach to consume enough calories to support their growth. And yeah, if they're under eating, we might see them run into issues. If we look at some of the more recent studies, like the Vichy diet study out of Germany, you see that no, the kids, if they're eating the same amount of calories or similar amount of calories to their omnivorous counterparts, they're getting similar amount of protein. If anything, they have a favorable micronutrient intake, they grow just fine. It's very compatible with what we're seeing out of the omnivores. If you look at the maybe few kids who were growing at, say, a slower rate, perhaps being qualified as stunted, they either had really short parents or they were eating very, very low amounts of calories.
Another thing we brought up with Dr. Matthew Nagra is the observation that a lot of these ex-vegans tend to go on extreme diets.
Something that I see a lot in that sort of group is that they'll go with a raw vegan diet, they'll do fasting. Once they start incorporating animal foods, they'll go to the carnivore side, like never in the middle.
I think a good example is Giovanna Mendoza, who started off with raw veganism, even says herself she took things to the extreme right from the beginning, naming herself Ravana. She centered her YouTube channel around raw, oil-free, soy-free, gluten-free, quote-unquote cleansing recipes for weight loss and even extreme water fast. 3 years in, she realized a raw vegan diet just wasn't sustainable for her and started incorporating cooked foods, which is great to see because cooked foods like legumes are extremely beneficial for our health.
In fact, we have over the last about year or so, we've had 2 meta-analyses of prospective cohorts suggesting that legume consumption can lower the risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality, with the benefits being seen up to even about 400 grams a week. But yeah, legumes, excellent source of protein, excellent source of minerals and fiber on a plant-based diet. And so I would really advise, anyone on a plant-based diet to try to incorporate them.
Elise Parker also went raw vegan overnight, and over the years, tried every extreme version of a plant-based diet, including high carb, low fat, high fat, low carb, and water fast.
Today I'm going to be sharing with you what I'm eating, a full what I eat in a day.
Bonnie Rebecca and a partner were also initially on the raw till 4 train, which is a high raw diet popularized by Freely the Banana Girl. Then we have Tim Sheath.
I tried whole food plant-based. I tried like high carb diet, which was the main one for athletes. I tried high fat vegan. I tried junk food vegan and try eating with no guilt. And then I got into other things like urine therapy, which for me, as the human who living that experience, I felt benefits from it for years.
It's important to say that Tim Sheaf has been coming back onto the plant-based diet after a couple of years as an ex-vegan, but the point is he highlights yet another person who's tried lots of different restrictive versions of the plant-based diet and then had some trouble.
I've done a lot of crazy things in my life, but I haven't eaten only meat for 30 days.
That was Elise Parker, and she is one of the many ex-vegans who jump from vegan to carnivore. In my opinion, the carnivore diet is the most extreme form of the elimination diet because you're eating entirely flesh, which is similar to human flesh, i.e. what we're made up of. So some people with extreme allergy issues have found it beneficial in the short term, but there's no long-term data on this unsustainable, unethical pattern eating. And here's the really key thing. A lot of people use the carnivore diet as a halo effect to justify all forms of animal product consumption. Take Elise Parker, for example, who ate bacon, a class 1 carcinogen, daily during this challenge. It's pretty ironic then that she claims grass-fed beef impacts your body differently than factory-farmed beef, which is a sentiment we hear from most non-vegans.
I made a point to learn about the importance of meat quality and how much of an impact it can make both on our health and the environment.
Yeah, there are a lot of grandiose claims made about the like grass-fed organic meat and that. And when it comes to health, I mean, we know, at least with a fair degree of certainty, some of the main components of red meat in particular that are harmful. We know that the saturated fat content, perhaps the dietary cholesterol content to a degree, perhaps the heme iron as well, can be, increasing risk of chronic diseases like cardiovascular diseases, colorectal cancer, and so on. And those are going to be inherent to grass-fed products as well. Now, if you're having really lean cuts, yeah, they're lower in saturated fat. Perhaps the fat content is a little bit different in grass-fed options versus conventional, but you're not getting rid of all of that. And we have multiple substitution analyses now where they model what it would look like to replace a relatively small amount of animal protein, let's say about 3% of calories from red meat protein in particular with plant protein, and we see reductions in risk of cardiovascular disease mortality, all-cause mortality. And that's independent of the fatty acid and fiber content. One of the biggest benefits of switching from meat to, say, a plant protein source would be the increase in fiber and the decrease in saturated fat, possibly the increase in polyunsaturated fat, depending on which sources you're using. Yet they essentially remove that from those analyses, and we still see a significant benefit.
So moving on, another thing we hear from Elise Parker is that the carnivore diet helped with digestion.
The digestion was honestly totally fine. In fact, it was way better than when I was vegan.
Some people do notice, at least in the short term, some improvements in symptoms, especially gut-related symptoms, when adopting a carnivore diet. I think it's totally because it is an elimination diet. If something is affecting you and you're eliminating most things, chances are you're going to hit whatever it is that is bothering you. People will suggest, well, I feel great, I'm in great shape, therefore this diet is healthy. And they're looking at that short-term, say, bump in their health. But that doesn't tell us anything about long-term health. Not at all. I mean, you can look at smoking. Smoking might make someone feel good in the temporary, but it doesn't lead to better health outcomes. You can talk about hard drugs too. People feel pretty good when they're doing them. It doesn't lead to a lot better long-term health outcomes. We shouldn't be extrapolating these short-term improvements in symptoms perhaps that aren't even related to chronic disease to, oh, this is going to be fine for me over the next 30, 40, 50 years.
What are your thoughts? Do you think it might be more than a coincidence that these popular ex-vegans have so many behaviors in common?
How many ex-vegans do you know who ate a balanced 2,500 calorie diet per day, who developed SIBO or other gut issues? How many vegans do you know who develop pathogenic bacteria in their guts without drinking their own piss?
So what do you think? When I get asked about this, I normally tell people two things. Number one, the longest lived cultures historically consumed a nearly exclusively plant-based diet. Number two, the largest dietetic associations in the world say an exclusively vegan diet is nutritionally adequate for all stages of life.
So the one thing I really want to stress is that if you're struggling with your health, seek out professional care, work with a doctor, get a diagnosis hopefully, and then you can work on improving that. If that needs to be done through nutrition, then work with a nutrition professional, like a dietitian. You can perhaps get a referral from your doctor. When you're going to, social media for your health concerns or Googling, you're going to go down all sorts of rabbit holes. You're going to essentially be shooting in the dark. There isn't a need, as far as I'm concerned, to start eating animal products again. I haven't seen a condition where that would absolutely be necessary. Sure, there are conditions where it's perhaps more difficult, in which case, yeah, professional guidance might be the way to go. But again, just get that diagnosis and work with a professional. I just can't reiterate that enough.